All right, let's dive into something that sounds like it's straight out of a science fiction movie. We're talking about storing our most important information in glass. And not just for a few years, but for over 10,000 years.
Think about it. We live our lives online, right? We're creating mountains of photos, videos, documents, all of it. And we kind of just assume it's all safe up there in the cloud, forever. But what if I told you that our entire digital world is actually incredibly fragile? That it's built on a foundation that's constantly threatening to just crumble away?
You see, the big problem we're all facing is the very real threat of a digital dark age. Now, this isn't about you forgetting your password. This is about the physical media our data is stored on failing. It's a hidden, constant, and super expensive battle just to keep our digital history from vanishing into thin air.
And at the absolute heart of this problem is something called the migration tax. You see, you don't just save a file once and you're done. To keep it safe, cloud providers have to constantly copy everything from old, degrading storage to brand new media. This happens every 3 to 10 years. It's this endless cycle that burns through a ton of energy, hardware, and money.
I mean, think about the workhorses of data archives today: magnetic tapes and hard drives. They're super sensitive. A little too much heat, a bit of humidity, a stray magnetic field, and poof, your data can get corrupted or just completely lost. They simply weren't designed to last forever, not even close.
So what's the alternative? Well, researchers at Microsoft's Project Silica decided to look to the past to solve this very futuristic problem. And they found their answer in one of the oldest, most durable materials humanity has ever created: glass.
And to really get a sense of the massive leap we're talking about, just look at this comparison. Magnetic tape, which is our best long-term option right now, might last 30 years if you're lucky. This silica glass, it's rated to last over 10,000 years. It's not even in the same league. It's a whole different sport.
Yeah, just let that number sink in for a second. 10 millennia. We are talking about a storage medium that could literally outlast entire civilizations. It could preserve our knowledge for a future that we can't even begin to imagine. And hey, this isn't just a theoretical number. They have put this glass through hell to prove it. It's been baked at crazy temperatures, boiled in water, scratched up with steel wool, flooded, and even zapped with an electromagnetic pulse. And through all of that, the data was perfectly fine. It is, for all intents and purposes, an indestructible archive.
The advantages just become clearer and clearer when you put them side by side. With glass, that whole migration cycle, it's gone. The e-waste from constantly throwing out old tapes, it becomes almost nothing. The need for those energy-guzzling air conditioners to keep things cool? Nope, it can just sit at room temperature. And the resilience, well, it's just off the charts.
So how in the world do you get data into a solid chunk of glass? This is where the magic really kicks in, and it involves some incredibly fast lasers and some very smart AI.
The system uses something called a femtosecond laser. It fires these pulses of light that last for just a quadrillionth of a second. I mean, it's mind-bogglingly fast. These pulses are so precise, they create tiny 3D structures inside the glass. They call them voxels, without ever even marking the surface. You can think of it like a microscopic 3D printer that uses light instead of ink.
The whole process is actually pretty elegant. First, the laser writes the data in dozens, maybe even hundreds of layers deep inside the glass. Second, that little glass platter just sits on a shelf. It's totally inert, using zero power. Then, when you need the data, a computer-controlled microscope scans those layers. And finally, powerful AI algorithms look at the patterns and decode them right back into your original file.
Now, one of the huge breakthroughs that makes this whole thing actually practical is the type of glass they're using. At first, the project used this really expensive pure quartz. But recently, the researchers figured out how to use common borosilicate glass. You know, the same stuff in your Pyrex measuring cup. It holds a little less data, sure, but it's incredibly cheap and easy to find, which really opens the door for using this on a massive scale.
Okay, so we have these super durable glass platters. Awesome. But how do you manage millions of them in a huge data center? You can't have people rummaging through shelves. You need robots. Of course you need robots.
So this is the Rascal system. Instead of one giant robotic arm like you see in old tape libraries, this thing uses a whole swarm of small, independent robots. These little shuttles can crab sideways and move up and down, just zipping around to grab a specific platter and bring it to a reader in just a few seconds. And it is incredibly efficient. A robot can find and grab any given platter in just a few seconds. But the most amazing number here is the energy reduction. Compared to the old-school robotic systems, this swarm design uses up to 90% less power. That's huge.
This all adds up to what they call a resource proportional system. It's a fancy term, but all it really means is that the library only uses significant power when it's actually doing something, when a robot is fetching a platter or a laser is writing to one. This is a complete game changer compared to tape archives that have to burn energy 24/7 just to keep the climate control running.
So, what's the big picture here? What does this all mean? Well, this isn't just some cool lab experiment. This technology could have profound effects on our culture, our environment, and how we think about preserving human knowledge itself.
And to prove this really works in the real world, Microsoft teamed up with Warner Bros. They took the entire 1978 movie Superman and stored it on a single piece of glass, about the size of a drink coaster. They wrote the 75-gigabyte file, and then they read it back. Perfectly. That one test proved the potential to save our most iconic cultural artifacts forever.
And the applications from here are just endless. The Global Music Vault is already using this to store our musical heritage in a doomsday-proof vault up in the Arctic. Just imagine, national archives, critical scientific data from things like genomics, our entire literary history, all of it kept perfectly safe for thousands of years. And let's not forget the environmental impact, which is massive. By ending this constant cycle of making and then throwing away tapes and hard drives, we could drastically reduce the mountains of electronic waste that data centers produce every single year.
So that's the ultimate goal here. Project Silica is about finally ending that expensive migration tax, creating a much more sustainable, greener cloud, and, for the first time in history, giving ourselves a truly permanent way to protect all of human knowledge. It all leaves us with one last, fascinating question. For most of human history, we've struggled with how to preserve our stories. Pretty soon, the challenge might be deciding what is actually worth saving for the next 10,000 years. So, what would you choose?